What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Flipped Lifestyle Podcast. It is great to be back with you again today. Super excited normally to talk to a member of one of our communities so I can help them with their online business. But today, I'm helping a member of my team, man. I'm helping a member of my team. I've got Stephen Foust in the house, the head coach of the Flipped Lifestyle universe. And we've also got Kevin Crow. So, Stephen, welcome to the program. And Kevin, welcome to the Flipped Life. Welcome to this side of the microphone, guys.
Yeah, it's like deja vu, brother. Feels like I've been here, done that before. So it's got to be a whole other way of looking at this. I love it. And it's like you've always said, I get to watch the magician's hands from behind the scene, man. So I want to see some David Copperfield here. Let's go.
Let's make some magic.
I'm usually behind the scenes, but this is my face for those of you who don't know me.
And in true fashion of Flip Lifestyle and working for Shane Sams, I texted Kevin 15 minutes ago and said, yo, do you want to be on the podcast? So
honestly, for my anxiety, that was better than me knowing several hours beforehand. So I'm like, let's go.
I heard you recently, Kevin, on an episode. I was in my truck. I was going down the road. And I was like, I'm going to listen to Shane Sams here on the way to the grocery store. So I put it in, and then Kevin's voice comes on and says, "Hey, this is Kevin Crow, and I just want to let you know that the audio in this episode really sucks. So don't hate on us. Don't hate me. It's just like get on with it. You'll live. The content's good. See you later."
And remember, guys, we have recorded over 1,000 episodes of all my podcasts put together. I've done a lot of podcasting. And you'll be happy to know that 10 years into this gig, I still have no clue what I'm doing and have tech problems every single week. We actually have been looking you probably in the last few episodes, maybe the last few months. I don't know how long it's been going on. I've heard like a popping noise in our audio. And we have looked everywhere for it. So this morning, before I recorded this one, I literally ordered everything brand new. I've got a brand new mixer, brand new wires, brand new microphone, brand new boom mic. And when I logged on, they still couldn't hear me. So we figured it out, though. That's what podcasting is. If you're going to host a podcast show, that's what you do. So what we're going to do with this episode is we're going to do something kind of interesting. You know, as we expand Flip Lifestyle, our goal is always to serve our audience at a higher level, whether that's the members of the Flip Lifestyle community or right here on the podcast every single week. And we want to expand our reach. We want to expand our service. And to do that, we want to actually interview more of our members, more of our community members. We want to work with them and help them take their online business to the next level, become the hero of their story, make more money, flip their life, and live the life that they want. And but there's only so many hours that Shane Sams has in the day, right? So what we want to do is Stephen is actually going to start hosting some of our podcast episodes. Our goal later down the road will be to get to 2 episodes a week so that you guys have more great content to learn how to make money online, how to live your best life, how to live that flipped lifestyle. And right now he's getting ready to interview 4 amazing members of the Flipped Lifestyle community. And you will hear him on the podcast about every other week throughout the summer and going forward. And Stephen and I were talking about how we can, I can kind of pass over the systems, pass over the script. I always joke that I have an airplane checklist. I'm like a pilot of a 747 when I sit down on this podcast microphone. It's my job to make sure this thing doesn't crash. And what do great pilots do before every takeoff, y'all? They have a checklist. They literally have a clipboard and a paper checklist, and they go through it every time, no matter what, to make sure that everything goes off without a hitch. And Stephen and I were getting together to do this. And actually, Stephen was like, hey, man, why don't we just record this? Let's just do it. Let's just record this. That way I've got it. And I was like, yeah, then I can air it on the podcast. Maybe we can even put this inside of the Flip Lifestyle Blueprint so that everybody, when they say, hey, I want to host a podcast, they have pretty much a checklist of how to host a podcast. I've hosted over 1,000 podcasts of my own. I've been on hundreds of podcasts. And I've got a pretty airtight system for how we run the show around here. It's just a bulleted list. It's some things we think through pre-interview, during the interview, and post-interview. And anybody can use this template to go out and host a podcast of your own, especially an interview podcast where it's going to be you and a guest, maybe a guest that you don't know very well, or you're just meeting for the first time. And when you have a plan, you can actually execute the plan and you get a very, very, very super consistent result. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to be coaching up the head coach himself. on how to host a podcast, how to host an interview podcast, especially how to host the Flip Lifestyle podcast. So you can kind of see behind the scenes of how we do things. And we brought Kevin in because he's the one who actually runs the podcast. And I'm going to make sure I didn't leave anything out or forget anything. Okay. So you boys ready to go? Are you ready to do this?
Yeah.
Ready to rock?
And when you said pilot checklist, if I know people can't see this, but here were my fingers pointing on the wall. I was a private pilot. And this is where they cut the shirt out. When it's traditional when you're flying, the first solo flight you do, they take your shirt, they cut the back out of it, and they put some writing on it, the first flight date, blah blah blah. So this is pictures of my first flight. So I know what a checklist looks like, bro. Right? I
got actually flown a plane. Well, this should be easy.
Yeah, back in the day, without all this GPS, this is back in the 90s, but with all this GPS stuff we have today, back in the day, we had what we called a knee board. And our knee board, we had Velcro that went around our knee, and it had our checklist on it. So in this spirit of things, every podcast episode I do for Flip Lifestyle, I'm gonna have a knee board, bro. I'm gonna have a knee board with a checklist.
With the checklist on your leg.
And I'm going right down the checklist. And that's how we're going to do this. I'm going to make it work.
He's going to have to get a second camera that points at his knee that he can flip to, so you can include some of that on the YouTube channel.
The only thing guys, I have to offer behind me is just a Mario coin lamp. I don't have anything cool like Steven. I just have like a little lamp from Mario Brothers.
I've got some bootleg Kentucky thing. I had some redneck out here make me, and a fake $1 Million Man championship belt. But you know what? Be a pilot.
I was watching. Coincidentally, I was watching a podcast, YouTube video of you and Jill and Josh Stanton last night. I ran across it somehow, and you were talking about that Kentucky. That he asked you, is like, did you pick that up at Walmart? And you said, no, bro, guy had to cut a tree down to make this thing.
Oh yeah,
for
man,
me,
I had to have a guy go make that. He made. What it was funny was he saw he had a Tennessee one. And I was like, I don't want a Tennessee one, but I texted him. I said, can you make me another one? And he's like, yeah, I'm like going to get some wood this week to make some more. And then he totally made it for me. It was like $300.
So your Kentucky map created deforestation in the world.
Yes. But we cut down a Kentucky tree and we planted
that's right.
So it's all good.
That's all good. Yeah.
All right. So here's what we do. All right. All interviews start at Flip Lifestyle. And this is just how interview podcasts work, guys. I want you to know that, like, when I first started podcasting, probably about 200 episodes in, I dedicated myself to learning everything I could about how to be a great podcast host. I would sit down, I would take courses. I listened to a ton of great podcasters to make sure that I was hearing what they were doing, and I was kind of being meta about it. I was breaking down all of the things that they did. And then I even watched like Larry King episodes, and I would break down the common questions he would ask, like how did he control the flow? So I assure you, I have got my 10,000 hours in as a podcast interview host, because most of you listening know that too. So here's what we do first. The first thing we do is we choose our guests wisely. Okay. We really think about who we want on the show. For us, we have very particular criteria. One, we want people who are in our community, people who pay attention and deserve to be rewarded. So if you have bought our product and you're in our community and you're taking action and you are working hard and seeing results, that's the people we usually invite on the podcast. Doesn't mean you got to be a millionaire. If someone makes their first sell, if someone launches their podcast, if someone is throwing up a YouTube channel, if someone's doing their first webinar, those are great things that we love to grab people out of our forums, our community, and bring them onto the show so we can help them and guide them through that process. So you got to decide who you want to talk to. Remember, this is your podcast, right? Who do you want to talk? Who is it? Why are you inviting them on your podcast? Also, once you figure out how you want to talk to, because it's your business and you're going to have fun, you need to figure out, ask yourself this question: how does this person serve my audience? Because eventually that has to go to the audience, right? You have to think about that. What can you offer them in return, right? Like, don't just ask people selfishly to come on your show. You want to be serving them, so always be serving them. What can they offer you? Maybe it is a big guest with the big audience and you guys are kind of exchanging things. Then you have to decide things like when they can podcast with you. We're starting to implement a lot more scheduling tools around this. You got to be able to coordinate that time. It's not really good to email back and forth dates. We've been doing this for years, and my team finally was like, Shane, please God, let us hook up, schedule once. Okay. We decide where you're going to do the interview. Like, we use Zoom because we have a really quality workflow with Zoom. Everybody knows how to use Zoom. So if you have a guest that's not used to being on a podcast, they can use Zoom. It's easy to schedule the interview. It's easy to record the interview. Zoom has cloud storage. It's actually really cool. When we record an episode, it automatically notifies us, me and Kevin, that there's a podcast ready. So I don't even have to tell Kevin it's done. He just goes in and gets the recording. And we always back things up. Let me set all that. This is something we don't do a lot, but I do think I would recommend it for anybody inviting people onto your show, is get a release form that you can use the audio forever. I actually had a situation last year where a guy wrote me back and was like, you have to take this down right now. We've got some things going on. It was super disruptive for us for a week. So make sure you're getting those releases. So the first thing you got to do is choose your guest wisely. If you pick a good guest from the beginning with a good story, with good everything that you need, it makes your job a whole lot easier when you sit down to actually do the show. So, all right. So I'm gonna throw that out there. So Stephen Foust, you're the guy that's going to be doing this. You're the guy that's going to be hosting this. You're the guy that's going to be picking people and doing this stuff. So, like, do you have any questions about that first part, the pre-interview stuff?
No, it's really clear. And I think that's key, because the guest is going to make the episode, right? If you have somebody that's not engaged, not making progress, not necessarily making a ton of sales, but with our audience, someone who's willing to show up, they've opened their wallet. Now they're getting on here. They're willing to be vulnerable and talk about the things that they struggle with or are doing well. Then we can, as podcast hosts, figure out ways to serve them that are not only going to help them, but going to really resonate with the audience as well. Because they have the same questions. They have the same questions that these people do.
Yeah. And also too, this is an important caveat here too. Like, no matter how good you think you are at choosing your guests, right? Like, we don't have a lot of stringent, we don't pre-interview. I hate freaking pre-interviews. Don't do that to people. I actually just cancel when people are like, hey, we have to do a 15-minute pre-interview. I'm like, no, you don't. You need to block off 15 minutes at the beginning of the actual interview to have banter.
Doesn't that take away from the actual interview itself? Because it's like questions already being answered before you even talk to the person. Yeah, it takes away the natural element.
Yeah. And there's also an energy when you first get on a podcast, Kevin. Like, it's like when you first get on, like, it's a new person, and there is a 10-15 minute period of doing that anyway. We're just getting to know each other, getting a little rapport. And like, I think you lose so much edge and energy in the actual interview when you do a pre-interview.
And there's this thing called editing that you can do after the fact. If there's something in there that you don't want in there, you can always take it out.
Exactly, man. So yeah, don't do pre-interviews. They suck, and they'll make your podcast be terrible too. That's actually brings up another good point. Like, what if you interview somebody and they suck? Like, what if the interview is just boring or terrible, or like getting words out of people's, like, pulling teeth? I remember one time we brought this. We've done a couple kids on the podcast that have started online businesses, and I remember one time Jocelyn and I were so excited because there was this like girl, and she was like going to talk about her online business, and her kids were like super proud of her. And bro, it was terrible. Like, the little kid never would say like more than 3 words. The parents were like hovering, like dance mom, like, like it's like moms that take kids to these pageants, and like they're just like hovering and trying to live vicariously through their child and try to coach them the whole time. It was awful. It was like, it was the first time I looked at Jocelyn and I said, we cannot air this. This is terrible. And so that's what you do. If the interview sucks, guys, don't air it. Right. But like, it has to suck. Like, most interviews are okay. You can kind of trim them up and make them good. Kevin and I have had a couple where we've been like, oh, this was.
Yeah. Those end up being like 25-30 minute episodes. Hack out a bunch of the fluff.
The nonsense. So before you, Kevin, I just like canned them. But now Kevin can wield magic and somehow make a decent episode.
It's like those filter lights. There's filters on that you see. It's like, put a filter. It's like, ooh, wow. You take the filter away, and it's like, what? Kevin
is the flip lifestyle. He's like those. He's like vintage, cool, dramatic. Like, he is our filter for our.
Or you just take it, make it a blog post. Take the transcription, make it a blog post. Move on with life, right? Yeah, that's what you do.
Yeah, we released it. That's a good point though. You could do that because you don't want your guests to feel bad. And like, also, like, it's that is a safe place. You could dump that, like, put the transcript up, and then you can say, hey, we posted this. We're not going to use the audio right now, but we posted it as a blog. We felt like it would be a better thing. So you always want to be nice to your guest and, things like that. Give them the recording so they can listen to it, or, if they want to air it, let them air it.
Part of being a good host, though, I think you would agree, Shane, is that you could take a bad guest and make them a decent guest by being a good host.
That's the follow-up that I would put on that is, some people rely too much on the guest for the show. Like they don't have confidence in themselves. They don't know what to talk about. They don't feel like they're expert enough. So they bring a guest on and they're like, tell us everything about what you do. And they just sit there for 45 minutes. That is not how it works. You're going to see here in a minute. Like your job is to be the host with the most, right? Like the MC is the most important person on the podcast. It's your podcast, right? So, but if you follow my scripting that I have, like my questions, how we host, you can be a good host. Like you can always save the show. When a student doesn't have a story that they can tell properly, I will always go into my stories and I will pull up a story. Like if I'm trying to tell, like if a guest is just really being closed-minded or not closed-minded, but closed-mouthed about like, and I'm like, hey, tell me your biggest like failure in your blog, right? And they're like, well, there was this time where, I didn't post something for a couple of days. It's just like terrible, right? Like that's not good. Like then I'll be like, well, there was this one time where I set the entire universe on fire. Let me go into that. Like I have to fill in the gaps. What do they say in radio? No dead air, right? So it's my job as the podcast host to govern that. And then we'll let the editing make it better. Okay. All right, cool. So, all right. So then right before, let's go into the next section. So we've got the good guest. We've got a plan. We kind of know what they're talking about. I like to prepare, but not a lot. Some people are like over preparers and they spend like a whole day doing it. I mean, guys, 90% of people don't even hear 90% of what you do. So like you shouldn't be wasting like a whole day of prep on this unless it's, I mean, if I'm interviewing Trump or Obama, maybe I'll prepare a little bit more. But like if it's just a normal guest, I like to do, this is my general preparation. I look to see if they've ever done anything on video or audio. Like if they've been on another podcast and they've been interviewed, that's amazing. Totally. Get that podcast and just listen to maybe the first 5 to 10 minutes to see how they articulate things, how they talk, what's kind of the cadence of their voice. If they don't have that, go to their social media, go to YouTube and just watch like a video or something. And even if it's just a video of, hey, we're on vacation, you just want to hear their voice and talk in their cadence. And then, I usually have like some note sheets. My team does this for me now, but about 10 bullet points about who they are, what they do, just so you kind of have it in your brain. And I do this 15 minutes before the show. I want it in my brain then and not any time before that. I don't want to be thinking about it. And then one huge pro tip. This will save your life in so many ways. I actually got this from Dean Graziosi, is no matter how well you know the person, no matter who they are or what they've done for you or why they're on the show, write their name in big, giant letters at the top of a piece of paper and have that Post-it note or piece of paper right in front of you. You will forget their name. I will forget Stephen and Kevin's name on this show today. So like write who you're talking to at the top of the page because you will forget that. And it's so embarrassing when you do it because you have to like, the audience never really know because you got to pause and be like, who am I talking to again? What's your name again? You can do it, but avoid yourself some pain and embarrassment. But
especially because you talk to so many people.
Oh dear God. There's days I talk to like 20, 30 people a day and I'll be recording 3 or 4 podcasts sometimes. And it's like, I'll be, you know how many women on our podcast I've accidentally called Jocelyn? Like it happens all the time, especially if I get like a Jackie or something with a Jennifer, Jill. Like if I get any J, I'm like, so Jocelyn, tell me about your online business. I've done that so many times podcasting.
Then I have to cut and paste where you said their actual real name from earlier in the show and drop it in. And it sounds.
See, there's always a fix.
There's a fix.
It up. There's always a fix.
Yeah. On the prep side, the podcast episode I did with Nick Loper recently, he hit record. So we bantered for a few minutes before he hit record, but because he's been podcasting forever, like you, Shane, and he, as soon as he hit record and he started going into the episode, it was clear to me that he prepped, right? It was clear he was taking things off my website. It was clear that he knew my background, that he studied, because he was regurgitating and reciting things about me that he had to study to know. So it just made me feel, as a guest, it made me feel like, oh, okay, he didn't just roll out of bed and decide to talk to me. This was a planned event that it also, as a guest, it breeds confidence in the guest that, hey, this person really showed up to talk to me, and this isn't just like filling air with his day with stuff to do.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
I like to have a nice bulleted list of about 5 to 10 things about the person that I can get in my head. Those are my fallback talking points if the guest goes quiet. So I like to do that. I really like to prep right before. It's kind of like how it's the same way I speak, and it's the same way I used to plan games. Once my game plan, like for when I was a football coach, was done on Sunday, other than practice installing it, I never studied it. But about 20 minutes before the game, I would just go back over my call sheet to make sure I knew exactly what was happening in the moment, more to ground myself in the present, and just to know what was like happening there. And that's another thing I would say too. I don't know why people do this to themselves. It's total torture. And I'm sure there's marketing reasons or whatever. Somebody could probably argue this from a soapbox. Good times. But like, don't podcast live. Like, don't live stream it. Like, don't live stream it to YouTube. Don't live stream it to. It's just, as a host, it makes your job infinitely harder when it's live. Like webinars, you can simulcast, right? Do that. That's fine. But man, when you're doing a podcast host or hosting gig, like sit down, enjoy it. There's so much pressure right before we go on air. I always say this to everybody. Hey, don't worry. This is not live. We're just recording our conversation. We are going to edit this and make you sound amazing. Just the relief that washes over the person right before we go on air was like, they always like, oh, it's so good. Oh, thank you for that. So like, don't record your podcast live. It's you can if you want to, but like, I mean, some people just like,
I think people do that because they don't want to, it takes the editing aspect kind of out of it. I think maybe people do it for that reason, that they don't have to edit after the fact. They just live stream and then it's there, but it really doesn't take too long to clean it up with some editing.
Yeah. We do light editing. Like we fix certain things, we take certain things out, we trim, but we're not like correcting for every and ah and all that stuff. I mean, it's a real-time process. It's like I record an hour, Kevin takes it. How long does it take you to do a podcast, Forrest? Does it take you an hour and a half?
Couple hours. Yeah.
Is that counting all the YouTube stuff too and is that everything?
It takes probably 3 to 4 hours to go through, edit, get it up on YouTube, make the YouTube thumbnail, do the show notes, all that stuff. Probably like 3 or 4 hours total, just depending on how much I have to take out.
So you're talking about like literally, guys. 1, do 1 or 2 podcasts a week. Don't kill yourself and do one of these daily shows. 2, get it. That's easier too because you only have to find a few guests. 3, start recording at 10, finish at 11. By 3 o'clock, you're done. And it sounds amazing and your guest feels good and it's just all ready to go. Okay. All right. So here's what happens when I actually get on the call. I like to block off on the thing. We usually block an hour for recording a podcast, but I can go over if I want. We don't ever do back-to-back interviews. Sometimes you'll get on a podcast and you'll look down at your watch and go, when is this over? And sometimes you'll look up at the watch and go, crap, I don't have much time left. This is amazing. Okay. I would say about 8 out of 10 of the ones we do are amazing like that. And then the other ones are like, okay, we need to cut this off right now. I got stuff to do. But like, I always plan for the first 10 to 15 minutes to get my guests comfortable. This is banter. My favorite television show from the 90s, and me and Jocelyn, we actually still watch it today a couple times a week, is Frasier. It is the greatest written show in the history of all shows. It's actually coming back soon too. And there's this amazing episode where Frasier, all he wants to do is host the Seattle Christmas Parade. He wants to be like the people that are like, and now coming up is the marching band from Dixie Heights. They're a wonderful troupe of 42 high schoolers. Like he wanted to do that really, really bad. That was his thing. And they spend the whole episode of like throwing witty comebacks and comfort things. He goes, that's good banter. That right there is good banter, right? So I'm always looking for the good banter. So I put a little good banter here at the beginning where I try to get people comfortable. Yeah. I do go ahead and do a kind of pre-interview. Like I might ask some lighter versions of the questions that I'm going to ask on air. And I preface it by saying, hey, we're going to say all this again in a minute. I just want to get like the nutshell. And once you let people start talking about themselves, they will instantly get more comfortable. So I ask things like, tell me about you. Where do you work? And then I always ask, tell me about your kids. Do you got kids? If they've got kids, that will immediately put them at ease because everyone can talk about their kids. So get them comfortable. I do not send pre-interview questions. Podcasts are better when they're more off the cuff. I use general questions that everyone should be able to lean into. And then I use follow-up questions very specifically to keep them going. So that's what I do first. Steven, you've done some podcasting. What's your podcast background, and how do you usually start your podcast? Like when you have an interview or something?
Yeah, I've done a few different podcasts, but I'd say the one that I've done the most, I've done 100 episodes. I did it as a kind of with a buddy of mine who co-hosted it with me. And one thing I like about the style of podcast that we do at Flip Lifestyle is you have solo shows and you have interview-based shows. Solo shows to me feel a lot heavier because I have to sit and stare at a camera and think about what I want to say. I love the banter of the way we do it at Flip Lifestyle because it really, it's just a conversation. It's just a conversation. You can pull things from each other and talk about it, and it makes it a really nice organic thing. But that's my podcast background. As I've done 100, 120 episodes. I've done some solo episodes. I've done a lot of co-hosting, not so much on the interview style, but more on the two people bantering back and forth. And I prefer that. So I think in our format with my personality, the way it is, I'm going to really lean in and enjoy not only having a conversation with people in our community who know, like, and trust us already, who already believe in what we do, who already are making some level of progress, so they wouldn't be on the podcast, and are going to be open to coaching and getting some help that other people could benefit from. So I think that format's going to really, really fit me and my personality well. And the purpose of this call is I just want to make sure that I'm keeping the Flip Lifestyle framework in mind, because this podcast host, we can go down all types of rabbit holes. And I just want to make sure the rabbit hole I'm in is going to be the Flip Lifestyle rabbit hole. Right.
Kevin, do you think solo shows or interview shows are easier to edit?
Interview shows. I think interview shows, because there's not really a whole lot you have to take out.
Yeah.
It's, just, if people talk over each other a little bit, maybe there's, some of that has to be taken out, but I think they're easier to edit. I mean, solo shows are generally shorter, so there's that part of it, but interview shows I think are easier to edit.
I think you can over edit. You can over edit an interview show too, right? Because you could take away the feel and the sense. And I when I do an interview show, or when I do a show with just more than me, I always feel like I have an ability to say, oh, we're not going to edit any of that, because that's just part of the natural conversation. I trim the tip off, trim the back end off, and then let it ride, man. Unless there's some obvious problem like Shane's circuit breaker goes out, an
F-bomb.
Or Shane's power goes out and Shane freezes up. It's Kentucky internet, and we have to go, oh my gosh, what's going on?
That happened yesterday. We were all on a call, and my power just completely turned off. And I was like, well, that's part of it. That's right. That takes me to my next point is, even before the person gets on, like, you should be on about 10 to 15 minutes on before that on the Zoom, because you need to check your tech problems, guys, will happen. It's going to happen. Your microphone's not going to work one day. Your internet's going to suck. Sometimes you just got to record it on your computer microphone and you deal with bad audio. That's what we do. And we're just like, hey, the audio is not like our normal podcast, but the content was great. We wanted to get it out to you, and we're not going to spend another hour re-recording a show that was awesome. So just do that. I remember the first podcast I ever got interviewed on. It was a podcast for youth football coaches. I mean, this guy had a mighty audience of at least 500 people. And, what I'm saying? Like, it was not like this big, it wasn't like ESPN or anything, but he was a youth football guy. And I was trying to get my football podcast off the ground. I was about to launch it, and I wanted to tell all these coaches that there was going to be another show. And he was interviewing me, and I had no clue what to do. And this was before all this Zoom stuff and all these tools we have now. So basically I had to call in on my cell phone, right? And it was like Blog Talk Radio, I think is what it was hosted on. And so I had to call in. This guy was like not a good host. Like he wasn't the best at interviewing. But I thought this was the biggest opportunity in my lifetime. I had put so much on this in this moment that it was just too heavy. So what happened was, about halfway through this interview, my phone call dropped. And I almost started crying. I was just like so sad and like, oh my God. Jocelyn goes, what's wrong? I said, the phone disconnected. She goes, oh no. And we thought it was, guys, we're literally recording a voice memo together. That's what we're doing. And something is going to go wrong. And if it does, don't panic. Like yesterday, me, Steven, a couple of members, and Patricia, who's my executive assistant, were on a call together. And we were right in the middle of this big thing. And I was making a good point too, Steven. I was so pissed off.
It was epic.
It was epic. It was like dropping bombs, like the mics, and like the whole. And all of a sudden, the whole power went out in my entire house. But I just was like, well, this will either come back or it won't. So I walked out to the the breaker box, and I started flipping breakers, and I grabbed a pop, and I just sat there and just waited. Then the power came back on, but then like the internet wouldn't come back on. So I'm texting Steven, like, I'll be back or I won't, whatever. And he's like, oh, it's all right. We're just hanging out and talking. Like, you got to just let it roll, let it flow. Everyone who's online knows that tech things can happen. It's not your only shot. You can always reschedule. You can always do something else. But a lot of the problems can be eliminated if you'll just get on and test your microphone, test your camera, and make sure that everything works before you get online. Okay.
Yeah. And most of the problems you're going to have aren't going to be the power going out. Most of the problems you're going to have are kind of like when we got on here. It's like, I can't get my audio to work. And also, if you get on a little bit ahead of time, you're going to not eat away at that hour that you've scheduled with a person, trying to figure out how to get your mic to work and your video to turn on.
And you've already handled the madness, and they never see it, right?
Yeah,
and then what's going to happen is their mic's not going to work. So you're like, I got you. Let's figure this out.
Exactly.
All right. So the intro. So here's how we start the podcast. Most of you who listen to the Flip Lifestyle podcast, you know that I say about the same thing every time. Hey, y'all, welcome back to the Flip Lifestyle podcast. Great to be back with you again today as I serve another member of the Flip Lifestyle community. And you know I'm excited about today's guest, Stephen Foust. Stephen, welcome to the program. Right. That is scripted. That is written. That is right in front of me every time so that I don't screw it up. For those of you who want to be podcasters, want to be YouTubers, want to be speakers, want to do webinars and seminars, whatever you want to do out there, here's one of the greatest tips I got from one of a wise old mentor in the speaking industry. Your first minute should always be scripted, and your last minute should always be scripted. The only thing that matters is how you get on stage and how you get off. Everything in between is fine. Don't screw those two places up. So I actually have it scripted for the beginning and end. So we'll say that, Stephen, that'll be our script. And then you'll just plug it in. And the next
as a representative of your brand on a podcast, do you want me to use that script or come up with my own script?
That script. We want the beginning and end should always feel the same, right? It's like walking into Walmart. Like, you're always going to see the greeter. You're always going to see the little aisle with all the summer stuff or whatever season it is. Yep. That's going to feel the same. They can change the rest of the store, flip it completely upside down, but you want to feel the same coming in. So
you want me to say, hey, y'all, welcome back to the Flip Lifestyle podcast. Great to be back with you today as I serve another member of the Flip Lifestyle community. And I'm excited today to talk to fill in the blank.
There you go.
You want me to use those words, that script.
Verbatim.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
Perfect.
That way the look and feel is the same.
I got to say, y'all is not an Arizona thing, Shane.
Listen, but it is a flip lifestyle.
That is a flip lifestyle thing. Okay, right. All right. I'm the honorary oos.
I'm the honorary oos, like the wrestlers. Right?
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
We call it the Hall of Y'all. When you get inducted into the Hall of Y'all, you have to say it.
I love it.
And then I actually do, right before we go on air, coach the person up to say, when I say this, I want you to say, hey, Shane, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here or whatever. Because what will happen is, if you don't, especially with someone who's not really used to being interviewed, they'll just go into a 30-minute tirade about their entire life. And we don't want that to happen yet. Right. Yep. So coach your person up to say, hey, thanks for having me. That person's going to be nervous. They won't know what to do. So giving them that scripted sentence will completely break the ice.
That takes me back to episode 301 of the podcast that I was on. And I did that. When you introduced me, I started going into my whole life story immediately. And you were like, hold on. And we went back.
I see Shane in the background going, oh my God, for the love of God.
What do we truck up, Kevin?
Because I was nervous. And so I was like, so it all started back in 1983. And just like,
I was born on a cold Tuesday night. Right. Right. Yeah, man. And that totally happens every time. The first minute's the hardest. Once you get started out, you can smooth it up. If you mess it up, the intro, just record it again. Just do it again. Anytime I mess up anything, I'll just say, and I'll go and I'll pause and get real quiet. And then I'll go 3, 2, 1. And then I'll just start right back up again. And that way when there's an edit spot, sometimes I'll do a thing too. I'll make a really loud click, and you can see that on the audio file, and you can go find a place where you messed up really super easy. So that that's a pro tip as well. All right.
So I got this thing here. I got this clicker. I don't even know if you can hear that because the mics drown it out. The mics drown it out. But on my Rodecaster, I have that little clicker.
It's like when Shane does the silent cowbell now.
I know, right? I've been ringing a cowbell for 2 years, or 10 years, or whatever it is, and like I realized you can't even hear it on the audio.
Nobody hears it. Yeah. We didn't want to tell you that.
It's the visual. All right. So the next thing on Flipped Lifestyle, what we do, I don't like to read a big intro. I like to let people introduce themselves. This is where we're going to start really letting the user have the mic. So how I transition is, hey, it's great to have you here. So awesome to have you here, blah, blah, blah. Real quick before we get started, I know you, but the crowd doesn't know you. So tell us about you, your background, and your online business, and just let them introduce themselves. Watch the clock. If they talk like 3 to 5 minutes, let them talk. You can always edit it down. You want more audio than you're going to use, so you get the good stuff, right? So just sit back and listen. You're going to really be a great podcast host knows how to like listen. And a great podcast host can also knows when to interrupt. That's an uncomfortable thing you got to get used to as a podcast interview host, is you're going to let them talk. You're going to let them do it, but you've got to be able to step in and go, so Jennifer, or something like that. Like, so that's kind of how hey, let me ask you a question. And you got to be able to cut people off, because especially people who aren't pros at this, because they'll just keep going on and on and on and on and on forever. Right. So this first part, try to make it 3 to 5 minutes. Let them get enough of their stuff out that you can riff off of. Okay. And then as I'm listening, usually I have a notepad. I'm writing down follow-up questions. I usually try to go 3. I try to get 3 good follow-up questions. I'm thinking about the audience. What would they want to know? Not what do I want to know, but I'm trying to get really curious. And I'll just stop them and say, hey, tell me more about this. Tell me more about that. Tell me more about this. And then I'll just let them tell me a little bit more about it. So I like the human interest part, especially for Flipped Lifestyle. I feel like getting people to know the guest is going to make them listen to the show and then listen to the advice that we give them later. Okay. So just a real simple conversation there for 5 minutes. So we got the first 5 minutes that kind of gets people familiar. They get rapport, you get some more rapport, and then the audience gets rapport with that person. Now we're going to like go into their online business journey. We're going to tell the story of when they started an online business, when they found Flipped Lifestyle, and we're going to use my trademark story pitch framework here that I coach and teach. So we're going to go through this process. For everybody, if you've not heard my storytelling stuff, I'll give you a quick overview. We do have a course on this inside the Flipped Lifestyle community if you want to go check that out. But basically, I try to take people through a process where I go once upon a time until one day something happened. So I decided to do something about it. Because of that, I took action. Because of that, I took action. Because of that, I took action until finally there's a resolution. And then ever since that day, they now help other people with whatever they do online, right? So what we're looking for on the once upon a time is take me back to the month before you started, where you decided you're going to get into online business, right? We want to take people back to that point. And then they're like, well, I was a mechanic and I wasn't doing good. But then I had this YouTube channel and I thought I could maybe help people fix their cars. Like that's what we're looking for, is the start of the online journey. And then we're going to guide them through that process. And the reason we do it this way is because everyone listening at Flipped Lifestyle, there's thousands of people going to hear this in their car right now. They're listening to this part. They're listening because they want to be the hero of their story. They want to be the person who decides to start an online business and goes out and takes their gifts and everything inside of them, puts them out in the world, and they're able to make money and they're able to flip their life and live the Flipped Lifestyle. So we need to show people that story, how that begins, so they can put themselves in it. And that's how we do that. So right before they started, how did you find Flipped Lifestyle? Until one day, for this podcast purpose, is I discovered Flipped Lifestyle. Like, how did you get into our community? How did you get into this? Right. And then after finding Flipped Lifestyle, so I decided. So like yesterday, me and Steven talked to a guy, and once upon a time, he was a landscaper. He was making good money landscaping. He figured out how to like estimate jobs correctly. And then one day he discovered the Flip Lifestyle podcast. He heard a guy named Jason Guyman on there who was a pressure washer who started teaching other people. And he thought, man, I could do that. So he decided to join and go in and build a business. And then we took him through his action steps of what we did there. So that's kind of the process. Now, whenever I'm pulling a story out of people as an interviewer, I want to learn 3 things about them. I want to learn the fears that they had to overcome on the journey, because everyone's got fears. And if you can hear someone overcome their fears, then you can help someone else overcome theirs by letting them listen to. I want to know the obstacles that got in their way. These are external things. Fears are more internal, like I'm not good enough. External is like, I don't know how to use technology, right? That's an obstacle. So I want the fears and I want the obstacles. Okay. And then we want to know their biggest question at the end of this section, that like the last bodita, Stephen. It's like, well, once we conclude the story, like, well, what's your biggest question right now? I will overtly ask them those questions to get more out of them. Like if they're like, this happened and this happened and this happened. All right, cool. Well, what was the biggest internal fear that you faced during that time in your life? Oh, well, I just didn't think I was expert enough to go teach people this stuff. It was, oh, let's talk about that. How'd you overcome that? And now the audience gets to overcome a fear. What's your biggest obstacle? Man, I had no money when I started out. I had to do all this like duct taping and free stuff. And we talk about how they overcame that obstacle. External, or my spouse wasn't on board with my business goals or something like that. And then I don't want to try to plant a question here. I just want them to say, like, what's your biggest question? And then at that point, it becomes a coaching call. It's literally just you and them going back and forth. And we coach people on air here at Flip Lifestyle. But for anybody else hosting a show at that point, this becomes the discussion. Like, what's your biggest challenge right now? What's your biggest challenge you're facing right now? And how are you going to solve it? Right. And then talk about it. Just be about it. Like, be in it. Never worry about giving too much information away right here. Like, our goal is to solve their problem on air if we can and give them their next step. Okay. So that's the bulk of the middle of the Flip Lifestyle podcast. You got any questions about that, Stephen, or any follow-ups?
No, it seems like a very straightforward framework to pull out of them interesting things that are going to help them have an aha moment and to help the audience listening to kind of look inside themselves to see how that relates. So I think that's good. And then when it gets to the questions, like what kind of like we do in coaching, what you've taught us to do, coaching people in our program, is like, what's the one thing to get you to the next step? Right. Yes. It's kind of that same framework. It feels like it's because this isn't a never ending opportunity to talk on air here. It's like, what's the one next thing that we can do to get you some forward momentum?
The best next step.
That's correct.
What we're looking for. And so the fear and obstacle questions, like what was the biggest fear you have already overcame?
Right.
What was the biggest obstacle? Because they got on the show because they have done something. Right. And the reason, so that has two purposes in this interview. Like the whole point of being an interviewer is to make the person as comfortable and confident as possible, so they'll start engaging. So even now, when I say, what was the biggest fear you had then, and then how'd you overcome that? And then I say, well, congratulations, you got past that and now you're already started. And then the obstacle, it's the same thing. If I can get a fear and an obstacle they've already beaten, they will tell the audience how to beat that when they're struggling with it. So that's good for the audience who's listening to our podcast. And it builds their confidence in the interview. So when we get to the point where they ask the question, they're not like asking it hopeless and desperate. They're like, oh, I've already overcome a fear. I've already overcome an obstacle. Now I've just got my next question. Let's figure this.
Yeah. It gives them this opportunity to be openly vulnerable.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
This vulnerability and hey, I solved this. The next thing we need to solve. Let's go talk about that. And let's go figure it out.
And
together.
Now we've done two things. Like we actually kind of go through their story twice, because we're going to pull out their story of their online journey and they're going to tell us the story of their life before their online business. So now we've got a question that's going to be asked that probably thousands of other people in the audience already have, right? And the audience should have vested interest now in rooting for this person. Like they've seen their fears, they've seen their failures, they've seen their ups, they've seen their downs, and now they're ready to go. So when people hear what we do, which that's what we do on Flip Lifestyle, that's another thing, guys, anybody starting a podcast, I made a decision very early at Flip Lifestyle to be very different from anybody else. I didn't want to interview only experts. There's good things about that. I get it. But like, how many times can somebody tell you about their new book, right? This podcast would always be us serving our people at the highest level to help them and to demonstrate what we do. Like, you know what we do at Flip Lifestyle. We sit down and we take you through a program, or we work with you one-on-one so that you can make your online dream happen. So
it's like the old do for one person what you wish you could do for everybody. And then all the people listening, there's a certain percentage of them that are going to get a lot out of it and be struggling with the same issues.
100%. So like, that's what we're really trying to do then, is like just demonstrate how much we love our people and how much we help them and to find the answers to their problems. All right. Next thing we do is we wrap up. So we're getting close to the end here. That again, this is scripted pretty hardcore because I want to make sure we get this right. People are taking time to come to your podcast. I don't care if you got one listener or a million. And, you really want to allow people the opportunity to like share what they're doing so they can maybe get some traffic, maybe get some business. So I always just end, the interview with, well, Stephen, what a great conversation. I hate that we're out of time, but before we go, let's tell everyone out there that might be interested in what you do and where they can learn more about you online. Right. So I want to give them a chance to like plug their stuff. I also too like do end right before I wrap it up. I'm like, let's stop here. This is your next step. What are you going to do in the next 24 hours to make it happen? Because if you're not taking action, it's irrelevant. Okay. So those two, that's how I wrap that up. What's your action step? Let them say it, not you. And then you can kind of guide it and then let them plug their thing. And then basically stop and say, okay, you don't have to stay here. I'll let you go now. I need to do the outro off air. We'll go ahead and record that, but you can go ahead and go. This was amazing. Have a great day, but just let them get off the call. You can boot them if they don't log off immediately. Sometimes people will try to ask me a lot of questions, but usually what I just say is, hey, I've got another appointment, which I always do, whether it's my family or my business. I'm like, hey, I've got an appointment in just a few minutes. I've only got a few minutes to do this. That's a great question. Maybe you could write us an email about that or something like that, or go post it in the forums. All right. The outro is super simple and straightforward. I say that wraps up my interview with Stephen Foust. Man, what a great guy. He's got a cool thing going over there in his online business. And I know that everybody got a lot out of that content today. So just some kind of quick things. Then I'll spin it back to, and you know what? Just like we helped Stephen today, we'd love to help you become the hero of your story, make more money, and live your best life.
And you want that to be scripted, kind of like that intro. Hey, y'all, right? Yep. That last piece to be very intentional about that.
Because the point of our podcast is to get people to buy our stuff. We have to give them
hey, guess what, y'all? Y'all are in a funnel. Whether you're in a funnel.
Welcome to the funnel, everybody.
That's right.
This is the
funnel of death, funnel of decision. That's what
I prefer the forever funnel. You're the forever funnel.
You're way too nice.
The forever family funnel. That's what it is.
My favorite Guns N' Roses song, Welcome to the Funnel.
Welcome to the funnel, baby. You're going to make money. Yeah. But this is our funnel. And, but yeah, that's the point is we got to give them the next step. What I've started doing lately is we're really changing and simplifying a lot of things. Just send them to fliplifestyle.com. That's all you got. We're not going to have any URL slugs, opt-ins. If people are interested, all they need is to go to the next step and then you can do all that work there. So,
you or Jocelyn are still going to do pre, mid, and post roll stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So we're doing all the ads and stuff. You don't have to do anything. We're just going to tell them to go back to Flip Lifestyle. That's the brand for Flip Lifestyle. And then what we do is we do dynamic ad insertion.
Yep.
So what we're going to start doing in July is basically just adds to our trainings and live webinars and stuff like that. So yeah, all that. We don't have to worry about anything else. And then the close is completely scripted line for line. That's all the time we have for this episode. Can't wait to see you next time. Until then, make the decision to get out there, take action, and do whatever it takes to flip your life. We'll see you then. Right. So we're leaving a hook there open to encourage them to go do something and then also tune in next week. And that's a wrap. That's it. That's the entire script during the interview. That's how I flow it. I like it to be as conversational as possible. I don't want it all to be scripted. I just want it to be templated, right? Where it flows the same. And that familiarity, people start getting used to it and it gets easier to do. So anything during the actual show that you got any questions for, Stephen?
No, I think it's pretty straightforward. It's kind of like it's like a play. You have act 1, you have act 2, and you have act 3 here that you go through. And then the takeaways for me, especially representing Flip Lifestyle and your brand, is to make sure that I'm starting and finishing the podcast in a very intentional, scripted way so that there's the continuity and consistency that when people tune in, regardless if it's my voice or your voice, they're getting the same type of experience.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
And then just from a standpoint of guests. So I have my first 4 guests lined up that I've seeded the farm with a little bit that I'm going to go out and record. But then just as we get new guests, any tips or things for me and for others listening to this? So beyond the 4, where am I going to go find the next 5, 6, 7, 8 guests beyond the first 4?
Yeah, I mean, the place we look is in the forums. I mean, we look for people posting in the forums, like the Flip Lifestyle community forum. So like when you see people in that success forum, or even if you see people asking great questions, I think that's I used to do that a lot more, but now we have so many people coming through. There's so much going on. The activity kind of just spills out of it. But man, if you get someone in there and there's a great question, or you see that they sparked a discussion, like there's 3 or 4 people have replied and that question needs to be asked on air. I mean, it would just be a great place to actually talk about that question. We go into the community. I member calls, like when I do my all call, like we have calls every week, guys, where you can come in and hang out like on Zoom with our people. We have small group huddles. There's all kinds of things going on, but like once a month, I'll even do a big call. We call it the all y'all call. It's everybody in the Flip Lifestyle community can come on and ask me questions. But like I always ask for successes there as well, and those are a great place to harvest people to come onto the show and like find people.
Well, that's how I got on your show, right? It's how I got on the first 100%. Time back in 2021. Is I was on one of your member calls. I had some stuff I was talking about. You answered and said, "Hey, that'd make a good podcast episode."
Podcast.
Yeah,
that's right. I just feel the question in the story, and like, you know, there's not a lot of filters. I mean, guys, if you just come in and take action, you're going to end up on the podcast eventually, like probably. So like, just look for something interesting and go down that rabbit hole. We have a new saying in our house. You know, that stupid question, like, what do you want, that entrepreneurs ask? Like, I just want to poke myself in the eyeball with a toothpick whenever I hear people do that. And Jocelyn and I were talking the other day, and we found out we worded that to be like, it really should be like, what am I curious about right now? That's what matters, because you don't know what you want. And if you don't know what you want, you're just going to pick what somebody else wants, and then you're going to build something you don't want. But like, what are you curious about? Like, if someone sparks my interest and is curious, I'm like, I want to talk to them. I don't care if they got one member or a million. I don't care if they have no members. Like, that sounds amazing, and someone's probably struggling with that question. Let's talk, right?
Yeah.
So just go down any rabbit hole you see that you get curious.
So in our framework, then I could get guests lined up either by identifying somebody in our community that I think would be just cool to talk to. They're taking action. Are there going to be situations that you're going to be pushing guests? Say, hey, you need to go talk to Steven. And I'm thinking of all the different ways that when you talk about a funnel, how are guests coming into the funnel, and then how are we then grabbing them and putting them through our workflow?
I think it worked. You know, like we always at Flip Lifestyle, we build the business we want to live the life that we want. That's what we do. Life first, guys. I mean, the business has to support your life. I think the flow will probably be more like kind of organic, like we do it now. Like, you know, Delin and our community people will see people that need to be on the podcast.
Yep.
They'll kind of alert Kevin and Patricia, and then we'll find out that they have it. And then probably, honestly, like it'll just, whichever link we share with them, it's based on calendar and availability. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I bet you that what we will eventually evolve into a little bit as we expand is the big testimonials to people who do, like, I had $10,000 last month, or I made $1 million. Those will probably be me, because that's flagship content that has to end up on testimonial pages and stuff like that.
Yep.
But I mean, I think it'll probably just fall into like, hey, Steven, you got time to talk to Bob? You know, like, I don't have time to talk to Bob this week, but Bob needs to be talked to before we leave.
Yeah. And then let's say my library, I'll call it a library. Let's say I always have 2 or 3 recordings in the can that I'm just in perpetuity doing. Then Kevin has flexibility to go say, okay, let's go put this one out this week. Let's go put that one out 2 weeks from now. And then he can mix and match and figure out if he's got a catalog of episodes that are done, then you can figure out how you want to put them out there into the world.
Right. We can put them out. We can not put them out. And we're doing some cool stuff on YouTube now too. So Kevin can even if we don't air a podcast, we'll probably drop it on the YouTube channel still.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So Kevin,
that's cool. It's been super helpful. And I think for me, it's scripting the things that need to be scripted, make sure the framework is in place for the other things that we're fleshing out, the key things we want people to walk through. And that's it, bro. As you would say, don't overcomplicate this.
Nah, man. Put on a t-shirt, don't comb your hair, and talk to people on a microphone. This ain't hot. I ain't comb my hair in 2 days. It's summer. I might not shave tomorrow.
In a Flip Lifestyle t-shirt. This is my uniform. This is my work uniform.
Content is king. Just serve the people. Hey, Kevin, post interview, like, basically what happens is, like, got the cloud recording, you see that, you download it, edit it, and share it everywhere. Is that pretty much it? Like, what's posted?
Pretty much. It's nothing too fancy. I grab it, throw it into iMovie, edit it there, export it, upload it to YouTube, strip the audio, put it in Audacity, clean it up a little bit, throw the intro and outro on there, and good to go. And then, you know, we can make clips out of the full video.
We email it every week. We email all of our podcasts to our list. Got to be doing that.
So every episode, Kevin, it takes you an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours to kind of go from here's the file to here are all the assets that we need to put out into the world. What's that look like? An hour, 2 hours, 3 hours? What?
Yeah, I'd say it's like 3 to 4, just depending.
You're using any tools like Descript or anything like that to clean up the obvious low hanging fruit, or are you just doing it?
I've dabbled in it. I've
Okay.
dabbled into Descript. It's, to me, Descript, it sounds a little unnatural sometimes because it takes words out. Like when it takes out some of the ums and ahs, it can detract from the flow a little bit.
That's a good point, man, about doing your podcast, because I'm really listen, you ever see those weird AI videos that are coming up now, and like you just feel like you're in an alternate universe and something's wrong, or like that AI art looks so off a little bit, and I'm sure it'll get better.
It removes a human element to it.
Yeah, man.
Right. Yeah.
Leave the ums and ahs.
Sometimes the pauses make sense. Pauses make sense. Yes. Sometimes the ums make sense. We want it to sound as natural as possible, I think.
As the podcast host, I have before, if people are umming and ahhing or liking too much, I tell them to stop doing it. And then that usually corrects it and keeps a few in, so it's normal. So you can lead your guests that way for sure.
I think it's important though, because they see this guy from Kentucky doing all of these ums and ahs. This guy's got this amazing online business and he's not super worried about that stuff. So it gives me permission to not be overly worried about that stuff too.
And I think in the future, it's one reason I love Flipped Lifestyle, but because we don't sell memberships and subscriptions. Like what we sell a path to be the hero of your story, and we sell a community. We're a community of people all trying to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And even these likes and ums and ahs, if you leave them in, people are going to start craving humans with all this AI crap, man. Getting people together in person, getting people together on Zoom calls, a real long form. The top 10 podcasts in the world, go look at them. The majority of them are long form, almost completely unedited hosts who just like to talk to people. Like this is not complicated, guys. And if you just do some organization and some templating and scripts.
Well, I'm going to do like you told me though, Shane. I'm going to steal all of this from when I do my podcast. I'm going to give you credit twice, and then it's mine. So FYI, it's mine.
I have created a monster.
That's right.
Right, man. That's all. Hey, listen, as long as everybody gets what they want out of life, I don't give a crap. Hey, listen, here's what's going to happen to Shane Sams. Guys. Here's what's going to happen. Shane Sams is going to die. Here's what's going to happen. And then Stephen Foust and Kevin Crow and a bunch of other people will be my pallbearers. Okay. And they'll bury me. And then they will die. And then people will forget that they were my pallbearers. And then the people forgot me will forget them. And I'll be gone, but hopefully someone will still be recording great interviews because
that's awesome.
Episode. So, all right, guys, thanks so much for being here, guys. Appreciate you guys.
Take care.
All right, y'all. That wraps up my interview with Stephen Foust and Kevin Crow, two amazing members of my team, and hope that was super helpful. One thing I have learned as a leader and as a podcaster and as an online business owner is there's only one of me. I'm only awake for 16 hours a day, and I want to spend at least half of those hours doing my stuff, hanging out with my family and living my flipped lifestyle, right? So I can't, if I want to do more podcasts, if we want to serve you at a higher level, if we want to get the word out more about what we do here, I got to expand. And Stephen Foust is a great podcast host. He's going to be hosting some future episodes. Our people love him, guys. It's unbelievable what he does coaching our people. And I said, man, I've got to bring you to the world, dude. I got to put you out here. You're one of the best online business coaches that I've ever seen, let alone that I've ever had in my own company. And I want to make sure that you're out serving the people as well. But we thought, hey, let's let everybody listen in, because now you know how Flipped Lifestyle scripted, how Flipped Lifestyles work. How do I lead the podcast? I've done over 1,000 podcasts in my day, and I've got this figured out. This is the same thing. This script has been in place 90% exactly like it is for probably the past 6 years, really. And it works like a charm every single time. So take that script, use that script that you can go out there and you can host your own podcast as well. Maybe you're thinking about starting a podcast. Maybe you're thinking about starting an online business. Maybe you want to become the hero of your story. You want to make more money and you want to live your best life. You can do that in Flipped Lifestyle, inside the Flipped Lifestyle community. If you want to learn more about what we do, get some free resources to get started and see everything that we do at Flipped Lifestyle outside of the podcast, all you have to do is go to flippedlifestyle.com. That's flippedlifestyle.com. We got a ton of free resources. We got a ton of live trainings that we do that you can sign up for, and we will help you get started so you can take your next steps. Other than that, y'all, that's all the time we have for this episode of the Flipped Lifestyle Podcast. We got a bunch of more episodes coming at you all summer long, all year long, all the time. And we're going to have even more so you can have those and tune in and learn how to make your dreams a reality. I can't wait to see you next time. Until then, make the decision right now to get out there, to take action, and to do whatever it takes to flip your life. We'll see you then.